The following is a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with your host, Jann Scott. We join Jann, guests, and callers in progress now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jann Scott, and we're doing a taped rebroadcast tonight, and a special section we're doing on blacks and the issues that blacks have with addiction. One of the reasons that we're doing this program tonight is recently, actually, just today, there was a large gang fight over at East High School between the Slugs and the Crips. And the problem is that there are two black gangs fighting with one another over turf territories around crack and heroin in the city of Denver. And it's been a continuing problem here in 1988. Over this past year, we've had members of the black community who are in recovery, former addicts themselves, and have been able to speak fairly clearly about the issues and what we as an overall community can do to help solve the addiction problem and even the gang problem here in the Mile High City. If you're in another city this evening, someplace in the United States, listening to this program, it doesn't matter. This pertains to you. So we're going to really be talking about black issues, and most of our guests on this evening's program are black and speak about the issues that they have had in the neighborhood. Some people are Mexican also, but we're going to try to talk fairly graphically and pointedly about the issues that face black addicts and even black neighborhoods and black gangs, and talking about controlling turf and crack in the Mile High City. The first person that we're going to tonight is Lieutenant Welton of the Aurora Police Department, a conversation that he and I had earlier after a gang shooting several months ago. And he talks in this segment about the use of crack by gang members and its increase. So we'll go to that conversation.
The reality of it is that we still have issues and problems in that community, and many people think that, well, I've gotten a car and I've gotten a house and then 2-car garage and 2.3 children, or what have you, the American dream type of thing, yeah. And yet I'm not fulfilled inside. There is something missing. In this country we live in, there is and has been a love affair with not only alcohol but mind-altering
I know this is probably kind of a stupid question, and I realize there are no stupid questions, but is there a drug problem in Boulder and an alcohol problem, or is it better, or is it worse, or is it worse than people think?
Much of it is underground. I call it underground. Okay. Mm-hmm. Look, if you look like you're doing well and you appear to be affluent, the image, I think, when we're dealing with alcoholism, there is still this image that overshadows everything, that the alcoholic is the individual who has got a long raincoat and ratty shoes and looks very, very nasty and lives out in alleys and drinks wine out of bottles and digs in the garbage can. And that image is only 3% of the total population in America.
My guest is Creed Diavanzar. We'll have more here on Addiction Free Radio after this break.
Mama, I'm depending on you. Tell me the truth. Mama just hung her head and said, son.
At Centennial Peaks Hospital in Louisville, when you call, the first thing we do is listen.
When I'm listening to someone talk about themselves or a loved one who's having problems with alcohol or drugs, I don't just hear what they're saying. I hear what they're feeling, what they're going through. I hear their concern, their fear, their frustration, because they want help, but they don't know what to do. That's why when you call Centennial Peaks Hospital, the first thing I'll do is listen. Then together, we can figure out the next step. If you or someone you care about needs help with an alcohol or drug problem, call us now at Centennial Peaks Hospital at 673-9990. That's Centennial Peaks Hospital, 673-9990. Call now.
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott, so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out. Addiction-free radio is aired live 5 nights a week at 7 o'clock Mountain Time in the USA on most of these...
I disagree with that, Jann.
Okay.
I don't believe that it is widespread throughout the Denver metropolitan area. There is most certainly, in my opinion, a crack problem in portions of our community. And predominantly we're seeing it, at least it's most evident right now, in the black communities and in the areas in northeast Denver and northwest Aurora. I have spent many hours out working, as have all the narcotics officers from both the Denver and Aurora Police Departments. You know, and I have seen many situations where crack is being dealt in parking lots or in streets, and certainly has had dramatic impacts on many lives in those communities, in that people that have found the addictive nature of crack is having a major impact on their lives, and they need to generate monies to buy more crack.
See, now, I don't disagree with you there. I mean, I know crack is just as addictive. I mean, it nails people first time out. I know that. We had a guy who was a crack addict on the program on Monday, and I mean, he really talked about that he was a goner the first time he did it. All right? And I know we have crack houses, or I've seen at least the news stuff on crack houses and busts and things. When I talk to treatment center people, they're saying, we don't admit anybody for crack. So I'm going, what the heck's going on here? So maybe you can tell me.
Jan, I can't speak to the equality of resources, but I might suspect that some of that is that the economic resources aren't available to all members of our community in equal proportions.
I'm talking to people like arts, the state-funded stuff where people can get into.
Well, and I guess, not having done a study in that area, I suspect that people in some communities may not be aware of these resources. I guess I can't answer why. I think that you probably have to do a comprehensive study about all the resources that are available and to see what portion are crack related. I think you have to remember that somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 11% of our community is black, and we're seeing...
So I get it. In other words, it's happening in a certain part of town. We got those gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, coming in from Los Angeles. They are selling to their own people and basically destroying their own community. They're trying to do in the Mile High City what they did in Los Angeles. Is that right?
Well, I guess I don't know if I would go that far. It's certainly, and very honestly, I see the impact in that community. We see very few, at least at this point, in those areas, we see very few white buyers and fewer white sellers. Certainly there are some people from all races of our community that are being impacted by this drug, but right now, at least the most evident problem, the one that we're able to detect and find, I suspect that it may exist in other areas, but we're seeing the street sales, we're seeing, and an example of this might be last Tuesday, we did a reverse operation, which you've seen some media attention given to, where we actually sell items that we represent as crack, and the buyers are being arrested. And I can tell you that in the later night hours between 11 and 12, we had no trouble finding customers in very dark places that aren't normally traveled very frequently in residential neighborhoods, that people pulled up very rapidly and were very anxious to buy crack and approached us because of the reputation that area had. And, I'll tell you another thing that actually made me feel good is that as we began to remove the buyers and sellers, we have actually had neighbors come out and applaud. And, I'm very pleased, and I would encourage the people in these neighborhoods to continue to call our department as well as the crack hotline, and that information has been very helpful in profiling the hot spots, where the dealers are moving, where the street selling is going on. And
well, I'll support that. What's the hotline? What's the hotline number?
It's 575-KRAK.
575-KRAK. And that's what is that? Is that a police station number here in Denver? Or?
Yes, it's a number that's monitored by the Crack Task Force, which is the Aurora officers and the Denver officers that are specifically assigned to work the crack problems. And I guess as evidence of of at least the problem that we're seeing, that we're keeping 6 officers and a supervisor many hours overtime, and there is still much more work than they can do in the enforcement area, specifically related to crack.
Okay, let's just quickly, how about what are the sales like in heroin and marijuana and just general cocaine? How do they compare to the crack sales as far as you can see?
Well, I think that you're dealing with different individuals in the community usually. We do see some heroin, although my impression, without statistical analysis, my impression is that we have over the last few years seen a decline in the heroin that we're finding on the streets.
See, now this bothers me because the people that are admitting into the state agency drug treatment center say the people they're getting in there are hooked on heroin.
Well, again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but my information that I had recently, and maybe I can give you that information in another show, is that there has been, over the last few years, a decline in the heroin addiction as it's measured by entry level into programs.
How about alcohol with the kids and the people that you're running into?
Oh, of course, alcohol is certainly much more available and much more widespread within the community.
Are they hooked on alcohol as well? I mean, as far as you can see, is there alcohol generally going on with crack, or not necessarily?
I would say not necessarily. I think crack in and of itself can be used with alcohol, of course, but I think that I would not say there's a specific link. There frequently is, but I just am not in a position to tell you that there really appears to be a link. There may well be, but I just don't know.
And a couple other things. I'm going to sort of throw a whatever at you.
Okay.
A curveball. But now, I read in the Rocky Mountain News, George Hagovic, who put on the conference, he said in his commentary that he felt that younger kids, people should go to jail and be convicted younger, and they should, first offenders should be imprisoned. Then you got the other side of it. We had a woman on who runs the program there, the empowerment program, and other people have said this too, that you put kids or you put people in prison, what you're going to get is you're going to get them to learn how to become better criminals, and they're going to use more drugs while they're there. And there's this whole idea of punishment versus treatment, and the fact that we do not have any good treatment for addicts in prison, and that once you use crack, you are hooked, and it is now the drug making the decisions, and that incarceration will never change that. We have to look at it completely differently, and I was wondering what your opinion on either side of that might be.
Well, I'm sure we could fill several shows with a discussion in this area.
Okay.
My feeling is that the buyer has to have a very clear message that if you buy cocaine and you possess cocaine, you go to jail, period. That we're going to send a very clear message that it is unlawful to possess cocaine. I certainly want to be sympathetic to the people that become wrapped up with these problems and may not be criminals in any other way other than problems involving the use and possession of narcotics. But
okay, that was Lieutenant Welton from the Aurora Police Department talking about...
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott. so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out. Addiction Free Radio is aired live 5 nights a week at 7 o'clock.
Okay, now we're going to go to a man by the name of Tony who leads a program called Blacks Against Drugs. Or if you're in a white community, it could be Be Against Drugs. And this is a community initiative going on in the black neighborhood to try to reclaim the community from the gangs and from the dealers. So we will now go to that conversation that Tony and I had earlier where he's basically telling me how to be bad. Yeah, I mean, now I'm white, right? You know, and I know like a lot of white people want to be bad. It's the problem of knowing how to be bad. You know what I mean? Like, I practice. Could we? No, I'm serious now. I was thinking about that this morning. You know, I was walking around the kitchen table going, I'm bad, you know, but I said, no, I don't know. I wondered, well, how can you do that? How can a white community have a bad program?
Well, we are working on some outreach right now. We were down in, what was that, Colorado Springs together?
Yeah, and I have to tell people, man, I mean, this program is hot, hot, hot. So go ahead. I was real impressed.
Yes, we were down in Colorado Springs together, and I agree with you. I think my kids are hot. They're very hot. And the only thing that someone has to do to get involved is give us a call at Youth Challenge Center. That's 388-1892.
Okay, what's Youth Challenge? And tell us a little bit about your kids, too, what they did down there. It was incredible.
Okay, in order to really let the audience understand what the BAD program is all about, I guess I should explain the BAD program.
Okay.
And then explain the Youth Challenge program. Now, the one thing about you can participate in the BAD program without being a part of the Youth Challenge. You cannot be a part of the Youth Challenge, however, without participating in BAD, because BAD is divided up into 3 components. Mm-hmm. Number 1, we have drug prevention, and we have a workbook that our staff has developed to teach drug prevention to youth in middle school and high school. In that training session, they have cultural awareness. I think we must understand who we are and where we come from. Then we can determine where we're going.
Do the kids go into the middle schools and into the...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's another component. But, and then I don't... You know, the one thing that happens, Jan, is that the BAD team gets so much exposure and so much recognition that people do not see the other components of BAD, which is, to me, just as important, if not more so.
Well, could you tell us about all 3 of us? I think probably a lot of our listeners don't even know what the BAD kids do. What do they do?
Well, before they can participate in the BAD team, which you saw in Colorado Springs, they must go through drug training. And that's a 3-week training session that goes 3 Saturdays. And then on the 4th Saturday, they receive their certificates and they have some type of activity. But in that training, it's real intense. They do a lot of role playing. There's family bonding where on the 3rd Saturday, parents come in, they do the reverse role playing. They go through some real intense type of things. They have sexuality on that 3rd Saturday, the parents participate in also. Kids need to know the impacts that drugs have on low birth rates, all kinds of things that impacts the sexual habits. So it's a pretty deep training session. Then on Tuesdays, they have marketing. One of the problems that we're having in the drug community right now is that kids are impressionable and they see young people that are earning money through drugs and they're not able to earn money sometimes because of their age and well, for various reasons. So we teach them how to exist within the free enterprise system and then how to function in it by giving them job opportunities. The BAD program has a job placement service.
One of the things, too, I was real impressed with this. In other words, if a kid's dealing dope to make money because he doesn't have enough money at home, you got an alternative and a way that he can make money.
Oh, definitely. And then, you know, the BAD sweatshirts and T-shirts and things that you saw. Our kids, not only do they sell them, but they manufacture them. We have our own T-shirt shop. So they print them, then that's manufacturing, then we have distributors, then we have the retail salespeople.
You got to see these shirts now. These shirts say, I'm bad, or they say little bad, or they say blacks against drugs, bad, and they're very graphic, very colorful. And this is how can I say it? It's kind of a sign I mean, you have to work to earn one of those shirts. Is that? Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, no, they're open. They're they are something that they sell. So anyone in the public that would like to have one can buy one. Most definitely, that's part of their marketing efforts, and they earn 17% of what they sell, and however, 2% goes to the bank because we teach them to save. And then the other component would be the bad team, which you saw, which is the dance, the raps, the singing. Then we have drug counselors that, although in Colorado Springs we didn't get a chance to, we have young people who come on as counselors doing the time that they're performing, and they go through some drama skits and things like that. The bad program, the bad entertainment program, can go anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours.
Whoa. So I see. In other words, you can do a real short presentation, like for television or radio or something like that, or you could do a long presentation for a school assembly or something.
Right, and I should mention that next week on Channel 7, the bad team is going to be highlighted on the news on, I think that's May 17th, 18th, and 19th. And in fact, Channel 7 came down to Colorado Springs to tape that performance.
Oh, is that right? They were there?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were there. I know that the how long has Bad and Youth Challenge been going now?
Now the Youth Challenge has been going for 8 years. It started in Indianapolis, Indiana, and then we incorporated here in Denver September 5th of 1985. And the Bad program has been going since January of this year.
Since January of this year.
Since January of this year.
As an extension of the Youth Challenge program.
Right.
Whoa. Yeah, it is a huge community effort. And maybe how many kids are involved with Bad right now, and with Youth Challenge, and where exactly does it sit in the Denver community? I mean, where are you physically?
Okay, physically we're at 5151 East 28th Avenue.
Is that Park Hill or the Point?
That's Park Hill. That's right on the northeast corner of 28th and Fairfax. And presently we have 182 students involved.
182 students. Are there any other Bad organizations in any other towns here in Colorado?
Not here in Colorado, but right now in Indianapolis, Indiana, they're setting up a Bad chapter. In Las Vegas, Nevada, they're setting up a Bad chapter. And we've had people come in from Washington, D.C., Boston, Phoenix, Chicago, and Detroit that are concerned in creating the same program in their areas.
What do you think, Creed? Do you think Bad would work in Boulder? Should we have a Bad chapter there?
Absolutely.
We can use it anywhere. We sure could. I got a chance to... hi, Tony.
Hello there.
I got a chance to spend some time with Tony down at the training session, and I was impressed with what was presented to me and how they went in from the standpoint of ideology, how to work with getting kids to understand what it is that they think and why they think that way, and what's real and what's not. And with any change of behavior, you need to go in first and begin to explore the fact of why people think that way. The same thing with addictions. And once you abstain from the mind-altering substance, then of course you go in and begin to challenge the thought processes, because that is always the basic foundation of why someone would choose to use alcohol or drugs to deal with whatever's going on in their life in the first place. It doesn't matter what color they are.
Well, is that kind of like what your training is about? Your youth training, when you have the Bad training, so when where kids learn new behavior or new attitudes. In other words, you come in with that street behavior. Is that sort of what that's about a little bit, or not?
Well, see, now that's one of the things I did mention. That is part of the 3-week training program. All 3 weeks they do self-enhancement and image building, and that is directed at developing new attitudes. Most definitely.
Okay. And so, now in the neighborhood where you have Bad, I mean, Park Hill is basically a pretty good neighborhood, right? Do you have a lot of kids who are troubled kids, or coming in from families that or their parents are addicts or alcoholics, or they're abused kids, or not? I mean, what's the situation? What's the scene?
Although we're in Park Hill, our children come from all over Metro Denver. We have some that come as far away as Reed Ridge.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yes, a lot from Aurora. So it's really a cross-section, and there is really no particular target group. A lot of times people think that, when you work with drug programs, you work with all at-risk kids or whatever. But all kids are at risk when it comes to problems alcohol, drug abusers, and the family. The talent show that we're having tonight, some of the kids that tried out were involved in drug activity, but it was an understood and accepted thing that in order to participate with the Youth Challenge and with the BAD program, you have to make choice. And that choice is that you will, if you participate with us, is that you will not do or involve yourselves in drugs and alcohol. And we have, I think, right now about a 90% retention rate from those that we told that to.
So they're clean. In other words, you got to be clean when you're involved in the BAD program.
Absolutely.
You can't be chipping or doing dope or dealing or any of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely not. You will get put out immediately if you do.
Now, I mean, is that a pretty hard transition? For a kid who's got a drug problem to go from, I want to be clean, but the stuff's got me. I mean, what do you do?
It depends on how severe it is. A lot of the usage right now is recreational, and if we get to it when it's at a recreational stage, then we can deal with it. When it gets to be abuse, then we have to refer them to other agencies.
And then they go to treatment, or clean up, and then they can come back and be part of the BAD program.
Right.
Yeah. Creed and I were talking about that a little bit, on the way down. One of the things we talk about here on Addiction Free Radio is that we try to communicate with people who have a drug problem or an addiction problem, and try to help people and let them know that there's help available, that you can get off of dope, especially if it has you really bad. And I know certainly when I was 16 or 17, I was conditioned to become a drug addict. I was hospitalized at 17 years old for addiction. But I had to go the whole route myself. I had to become a full-blown dope fiend and get myself in all kinds of trouble and almost lose my life before I was able to clean up. So it's inspiring that you've got this kind of program, and the thing that I really got too is the BAD program is fun.
Well, see, this is one of the problems that we're having. There's so much negatives around drugs that every time you say the word drugs, and just saying no, it always seems as if it's difficult or it's going to be hard or it's going to be a problem. But Jann, life is fun.
Yeah.
This world was created for us to enjoy. And as we combat different scenarios and problems within the community, I try to get across to my young people that we can do anything if you believe in yourself. And it might be hard, but it can still be fun. And if it's hard, then just do it hard, but let's enjoy the ride, okay?
Amen. Did you hear about our pink Cadillac we have up in Boulder?
Yeah, I heard about that.
We got this big pink Cadillac parked out on Broadway, and one of the things that's going on in Boulder, and maybe we can talk about the neighborhood differences a little bit too, is in Boulder, there's today there's what they call the Kinetics, which used to be, I considered, a fun time, and sometimes I get a little controversial. Right now, I see it as a big drink down and drug down time for the whole community, and I know there's going to be some problems. So people are going to have some fun, but it really pushes drinking and drugging in the sun. And we have in our part of town over in 2350 Broadway, we've got this pink Cadillac out there, and I think we're going to call it Communities for a Drug-Free Cadillac. We might even put can we paint BAD on it?
Yes, certainly. All right. But no problem.
And we're going to have like a little barbecue out there right in the grass, right on Broadway, and we're going to get crazy. I mean, we're going to race this thing on Sunday night in an enduro race. But it's like, and those of us who are doing this, there's like no drugs, no alcohol involved, yet we're going to have fun, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the community differences between Boulder and...
It sounds good to me, most definitely.
Okay, well, we'll do that in about 2 minutes when we come back. 457-9952 is the call-in phone number if you'd like to engage in this conversation. Stand by, Tony.
Are you embarrassed by someone else's drinking or drug use? Do you make excuses for them? Do you accept responsibility for other people's actions, or have a sense of shame about who you are? If so, you could be one of the millions of people suffering from the painful, destructive reality of codependency. At Centennial Peaks Hospital in Louisville, we believe that codependency is a serious illness characterized by compulsive behavior, which results from someone else's drinking or drug problem. Centennial Peaks is a leader in the diagnosis and treatment of codependency. If you or someone you care about is struggling with the disease of codependency, call us now at Centennial Peaks Hospital at 9990. That's Centennial Peaks Hospital, 673-9990.
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott, so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out. Addiction-free radio is aired live 5 nights a week at 7 o'clock Mountain Time in the USA on most of these same radio stations. Addiction-free radio is the only regularly scheduled broadcast on the globe that we know of, broadcasting information to those suffering from an addiction. If you have a problem with an addiction or have any comments on tonight's show, Jann would like to hear from you. You may write to Jann Scott at Addiction Free Radio, Post Office Box 545, Lyons, Colorado 80540. That's Box 545, Lyons, Colorado 80540. We'll now resume the broadcast.
Our two guests are Creed and Tony, black men talking about the differences between white Boulder, Colorado, and the black areas of Denver, which include certain parts of Aurora, the Points, the 5 Points area, a bit of Park Hill, which is mixed black and white, and some prevention ideas, actually a really terrific prevention program called Blacks Against Drugs, how that is being used really to reclaim the territory in the black neighborhoods in Denver. So we'll go back to the conversation now with both Tony
The following is a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with your host, Jann Scott. We join Jann, guests, and callers in progress now.
On tonight's rebroadcast, we're going to be talking about sexual addictions throughout and in the beginning. The guest will be Dr. Glenn Nieibling and Dr. Richard Dateweiler, who are experts in sexual and love addictions. During the program, we'll also talk to some members of CODA. We'll listen to some callers who are in addictive relationships and how they've recovered from those, and that when I say CODA, I mean Codependency Anonymous. And then we'll also be talking with Catherine and Jenny Poole toward the end of the program, who are specialist crisis intervention therapists who work with abused children. We'll go to the program with Dr. Dateweiler and Glenn Nieibling. And help sexual addicts can integrate new beliefs and discard dysfunctional behaviors. Without help from others, the addict cannot regain control because the addiction feeds itself. If you're listening to this program, if you want some help, or if you want to help people who suffer from sexual addiction, if you want a better grasp on when a person becomes addicted, and if you are looking for ways to help people who come from sexually addicted families or who participate in sexual relationships, then this program's for you.
Come up to my motel room and treat me nice. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name?
We have with us Dr. Richard Dateweiler and Glenn Nieibling. So, I guess, what is sexual addiction? Glenn, can you speak to that? I mean, the definition of sexual addiction, what is it?
Well, a simple definition of addiction is a pathological relationship with blank. You fill in the blank. Pathological meaning sick. So it's a very sick relationship, a very compulsive relationship, which overpowers a person sexually. And the person acts out and continues to act out, sometimes in bizarre ways, sometimes in what society calls natural, but it's a very progressive disease.
Well, why is it I mean, why is it addictive? Why would those kind of relationships be? Why do we call this? Why are we calling sexual addiction addiction? I mean, how does it fall into that?
Well, sexual addiction is like any other addiction. It follows the pattern of addiction. I can't say that sexual addiction is different from alcohol addiction, substance abuse addiction, addiction to food, addiction to people. You get into a cyclical pattern. You start off with some preoccupation, you move on to some ritualization around that, and then you go out to some compulsive acting out. Then you feel remorse and grief, and the only way that you can cure your remorse and grief is to go back to the thinking about that, the kind of stinking thinking that people know about, and that cycle just increases till one is out of control.
We're talking with Richard Detweiler, Dr. Richard Detweiler and Glenn Nieibling. We're talking about sexual addictions, love addiction, that kind of thing tonight. It must be pretty tricky stuff for you guys to be working in this field. I mean, isn't it? I mean, sex and all of that stuff around sexual, isn't that fairly loaded and pretty?
Well, I think that some people would think that is loaded, but when you consider, unless you begin to really look and see this is addiction, so you treat this as any other addiction, and then I think it loses some of its loadedness. It may not with society. I'm not going to speak for them, but I think that in positions where Glenn and I are, and with our understanding of this as being an addictive process, for us it's not nearly that loaded.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Area code 303-457-9952. We're going to start taking your calls here in a little bit as we talk with Dr. Glenn Nieibling and Richard Detweiler. We'll be back after this.
Are you embarrassed by someone else's drinking or drug use? Do you make excuses for them? Do you accept responsibility for other people's actions or have a sense of shame about who you are? If so, you could be one of the millions of people suffering from the painful, destructive reality of codependency. At Centennial Peaks Hospital in Louisville, we believe that codependency is a serious illness characterized by compulsive behavior, which results from someone else's drinking or drug problem. Centennial Peaks is a leader in the diagnosis and treatment of codependency. If you or someone you care about is struggling with the disease of codependency, call us now at Centennial Peaks Hospital at 673-9990. That's Centennial Peaks Hospital, 673-9990.
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott, so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out. Addiction-free radio is aired live 5 nights a week at 7 o'clock Mountain Time in the USA on most of these same radio stations. Addiction-free radio is the only regularly scheduled broadcast on the globe that we know of, broadcasting information to those suffering from an addiction. If you have a problem with an addiction or have any comments on tonight's show, Jann would like to hear from you. You may write to Jann Scott at Addiction Free Radio, Post Office Box 545, Lyons, Colorado 80540. That's Box 545, Lyons, Colorado 80540. We'll now resume the broadcast.
What are some of the levels? Let's get right into this. What is this stuff so I can understand it?
Well, Pat Carnes in his book Out of the Shadows and in his teachings on sexual addiction, and he's probably the most prominent teacher in this field and professional in this field out of the Minneapolis area, has what he calls three levels of addiction in this normal progression of any addiction. The first level are those regarded by society as natural, acceptable, tolerable at least. And that's such things as masturbation, heterosexual relationships, and there when we talk about addiction, we're talking about affairs, generally. Pornography, strip shows, peep shows. Now with the new video stuff, this has accelerated greatly. Prostitution and homosexual relationships. Then there's a level 2. And in level 2, we have victims, and it's victimizing. And there's some legal sanctions that are enforced. And level 2 things are like exhibitionism, voyeurism, voyeur exhibitionism, indecent phone calls, and indecent liberties, like touching people. You know, example would be crowded elevators, and it's somebody comes in and a woman is touched inappropriately. Christmas time or big shopping days, people are touched inappropriately, and they wonder what's going on, what's this about? They think, well, this this couldn't be true. They just brush me. But somebody's getting off over this, often. And level 3 is the place where there's grave consequences for the victims and legal consequences for the addict. And we're talking here about child molestation, incest, and rape. So it's pretty serious, and as we talk about addiction, as Richard said before, there is a progression to it. And it's important to know that there's dire consequences to this. People lose their reputations, lose their jobs. It just gets worse and worse.
So what do these 4 levels mean? I mean, what does that mean, that what you just shared with us? So that, I mean, is there like a level of good or bad? Is that, or is it a progression or something? Or what
the progression there that he's talking about on levels, it has to do with consequences and with victimization. There's less victimization in level 1 addictions. There's more victimization and more consequences in level 2 addictions, and there are even greater consequences, and both for victim and for the individual. So, in that sense, that's what that level means. There are some people, for example, that may be addicted and they'll become progressively worse in their addiction, but they'll always stay within level 1. I don't want people to get the impression that level 1 addicts progress always to level 2 and so forth. That isn't the case. But progression within their level.
Okay, so the first thing that you just read to us, then, that really, so that's like that's a classification of addictions. People that are addicted to.
Right. And one more clarification: we're not saying, I think Richard would agree with me, that all rapists are addicted, or all child molesters are addicted. So we need to make that clear right off the bat.
That they are. You said they are addicted.
No, I'm saying not all of them are. Some are, some aren't.
Well, what's the difference? I mean, what would differentiate between a rapist that is addicted and one that's not addicted? Is there? I mean, it seems...
whether or not they fit the addictive pattern that we have described before. Also, when it comes to rape, I need to say that addictions cluster. And rapists are not as much addicted to the sexual aspect of the rape as they are to the power and to the violence. And that rape, first of all, is sexual assault. It is a crime of violence. And a lot of people get addicted to that violence and the power that is involved in rape, far more than just the sexual aspect of it.
Caller from Longmont, you're on Addiction Free Radio. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Gary.
Uh-huh.
And I just feel like I have a real problem with this sexual addiction. And what it comes down to is I'm also a Christian at the same time. And I have a heart for Jesus, and I just don't want to really have this addiction, sexual addiction, of just lusting after women, and I get caught up in it. I've been celibate for some time, almost a year and a half, but yet I have this strong urge for lust for other women and masturbating and what have you.
Okay, well, why don't we...
Yeah, let's... what I would first off say to you, and I believe it was the name Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, Gary. The first thing I would say is that you're not alone in that. You're not alone as a Christian dealing with this, because it is quite common for Christian people to also be sexual addicted. It is not, I'm not, so I understand from that perspective your desire both to rid yourself of this particular addiction and also understand your Christian faith. And to say that you are sexually addicted does not mean that you do not have a Christian faith. Okay, first off, you need to say that. And then to say that there is help out there. And not only with therapists, but with support groups, Sexaholics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous are there to help you. And we'll be glad to make those kinds of referrals for you.
Sure. Glenn, do you have something you'd like to say to Gary?
Yeah, Gary, it's within these 12-step groups that you can really use your Christian faith, because they're based on a spiritual foundation, and I would urge you greatly to get involved.
right now, I've been 3 years sober from alcohol and 5 years sober from drugs.
Have you heard of Sex Love Addicts Anonymous?
I've heard of it, but I could never locate it.
Okay, we're going to put you back on hold here in a couple of seconds, and I'll have Jack give you the address where you can write to them and talk to them. They also have a book out. In fact, I was reading in their book just yesterday where the program was founded by a man, I believe, who was in Alcoholics Anonymous and still had that sexual addiction going on. And he was talking about a lot of people who get off drugs or get off alcohol and say, you know, I'm going to clean up here, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm sure going to go out and have a good time at night. And then what happens when they go out and have a good time at night? It's like putting a huge gaffling hook in the side of their mouth and dragging them around. And a lot of people who clean up and get off of drugs and alcohol wonder later on, they say, what in the heck happened to me? And I mean, so what Dr. Detweiler said here a minute ago, he says, you're not alone, and you're not alone.
It's a very common occurrence. I have a saying that often, and underline the word often, that addictions come in pairs with a spare. And we often find that, and it happens.
Okay. Also, Jan, I don't, the local Sexaholics Anonymous has an address, and I don't think they would mind a bit if I would give him that address right now.
Give him the address? Sure, let's give it over here. Go right ahead then.
This address is a local address, and it's Post Office Box. Okay.
I need something right now. Hurry, real quick.
Okay, listeners, get your pens and papers out. We're going to give you some solid information that's sometimes hard to find, but we'll also give you the phone numbers here for Dr. Richard Detweiler and Glenn Nieibling later, so that, you know, if you have people that you want to refer to them, or Dr. Detweiler teaches a class at Metro. I mean, you know, it's
Okay, I'm with you.
All right. Post Office Box 3303. 3303. Okay. And that's Boulder. And the zip in Boulder is 80303.
And that's for Sexaholics Anonymous.
Right, it is.
What do we have?
The local number.
What do we have here for Sex Love Addicts Anonymous? Do we have that?
I don't know. I don't have that local number. There is one here.
Oh, actually, here I have it here in front of me. Let's give this out. Here, I have it right here. So, for Sex Love Addicts Anonymous, there's several addresses actually. I'll put out the one for the Metro one here in SLAA in Lakewood. It says come to the Day at a Time Club, 7550 West Yale, Suite 200, and they meet Thursdays between 8 and 9:30. It's a closed meeting if you are a sex and love addict.
Okay, now it's Thursday to what time?
8 to 9:30.
Is that an evening, I presume?
Yeah, evening. Also, here's an address for the national organization for SLAA, and this is their main office, is Post Office Box 119, Newtown Branch, Boston, Massachusetts.
Newtown Branch?
Yeah. Boston, Massachusetts, 02258. We'll be back. We're talking with Dr. Richard Detweiler and Glenn Nieibling. We're talking about sexual addictions. It's area code 303-457-9952. Thank you, Gary, for calling us.
Yeah, bye-bye.
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott, so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out. Addiction-free radio is aired live 5 nights a week at 7 o'clock Mountain Time in the USA on most of these same radio stations. Addiction-free radio is the only regularly scheduled broadcast on the globe that we know of, broadcasting information to those suffering from an addiction. If you have a problem with an addiction or have any comments on tonight's show, Jann would like to hear from you. You may write to Jann.
Sexual addict has an addictive experience, and it progresses through a 4-step cycle, which is preoccupation, and that's this mental state which creates an obsessive search for sexual stimulation. Then it's ritualization, the addict's own special routines, which leads up to the sexual behavior, and this intensifies usually, adding arousal and excitement. And thirdly, the compulsive sexual behavior, the sexual act, which is the goal of the preoccupation and the ritualization. And here's where sexual addicts are unable to control their behavior. And lastly, despair, that feeling of utter hopelessness addicts have about their behavior and their powerlessness. And so it generally goes from pain to pleasure or excitement back to pain. And the cycle repeats itself, and they're in trouble.
In a few seconds here, Dr. Detweiler is going to give us it's actually the SLAA 40 questions. So get out your pencil and paper. You can answer true or false to some of these. But Richard, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something here before, that a lot of Christians and other people get into kind of a controversy, or get real stuck around this sexual addiction thing. And I wonder, are there trainings available, say, for like clergymen, so that they can go to, so that they can help their people in their churches, or are there trainings available for a regular therapist, as an example? Maybe we have a lot of different kinds of people that listen to this show.
Well, of course, there's training through the school, but what you're suggesting, I think, is a delightful idea. I don't think we would have had that, and we are going to be having a program here in town next Friday and Saturday at the center where Glenn, sponsored by the center that Glenn's at, and by myself at the Institute for the Study of Drugs, Alcohol, and Addictive Behavior. And Patrick Carnes is going to be in town. It's a good opportunity for people to get information straight from the horse's mouth, and clergymen and psychotherapists and all kinds of folks should take advantage of learning around how to counsel a sexual addict.
That's right.
I trained at the Family Renewal Center with Patrick Carnes back in 81 or 82, somewhere, and I got into it by accident because I was up there studying family systems for drug and alcohol families. And this is where a lot of research was done, and they discovered all these sexual patterns. And so the only other training program I know right now is at Golden Valley in the suburb of Minneapolis.
Okay.
For professionals.
And for those of you who don't know, Patrick Carnes is a clinical psychologist, family therapist from Minneapolis. He's actually coming to Porter, where you work, March 4th and 5th. Okay, so if people want to go to those classes and learn about this, they can. No, only for professionals.
Only for professionals.
Okay, if you're a clergyman, though, because we have a lot of ministers that listen to this show, and therapists, if you're in that category, you could go and do this. And you two guys, or you, Dr. Detweiler, you spoke at this event that Mercy had this weekend, too, didn't you? Did you speak about sexual addictions?
No, I didn't happen to be talking about sexual addictions there, but I was there at that on that event. I have talked about this to groups like the EAP programmers, etc. That are those are the people that work the self-help programs in industry.
Okay.
And I have presented to them on sexual addiction.
Now, SLAA has this questionnaire, so we're going to do some of the questions from the questionnaire.
Yeah, there's 40 of these questions, but some of them that are interesting is: do you get a high from sex?
Answer yes or no to these.
Yeah. Do you get a high from sex? Have you had sex at inappropriate times, or in inappropriate places, or with inappropriate people? Have you had, or do you have sex with someone you don't or didn't want to have sex with? Have you, or do you have sex regardless of the consequences, like a threat of being caught or the risk of contacting a sexually transmitted disease? Do you feel desperate about your need for a lover or a sexual fix? Those are the kind of questions that are a part of the 4 questions. You want some more?
Sure. Let's say, have you ever felt that you had to have sex?
Right.
Do you believe that someone can fix you? Do you keep a list, written or otherwise, of the number of partners you have had?
And do you find that you have a pattern for repeating bad relationships, or either relationships or sexual relationships? Yeah.
Do you feel desperation or uneasiness when you are away from your lover or sexual partner?
And I think, have you lost count of the number of sexual partners you've had is very indicative of sexual addiction.
Do you feel desperate about your need for a lover, sexual fix, or future mate? Have you or do you have sex regardless of the consequences?
Do you feel entitled to sex? That's another one.
There's 40 of these questions.
Right. I don't think we can go through all of them, but I think that people get a flavor of what they are.
How many people answered yes to all of those? Raise your hands. We can see you from here. We have to lighten up about this stuff, right? I mean, there is help, and these groups work.
And one of the things that is interesting around the Christian faith is that partially, perhaps, part of the problem why Christians get involved in sexual addictions is the fact that we have not celebrated our sexuality enough in the Christian faith. And I think sometimes that in the Christian faith, we have looked upon sexuality as only a limited good rather than as a gift.
Now, wait a minute. Do you guys actually run across Christians that have sexual addictions? I mean, is that...
Come on, Glenn. Tell him about that.
I want to know, because I thought, hey, once you're a Christian, you're fixed from all of this stuff.
Almost every sexual addict I treat has a very strong set of values. Most of them, it's based in the Christian faith. Or it's based in one of the major faiths. And values is one of the problems, because that's, again, where they have this set of values, but they have this high compulsiveness, which probably developed in childhood. At least I think it did.
You say, now, most of the people that you counsel, because you counsel people who are sexual addicts, have these kind of defects that are based in the Christian faith. Is that right? So somewhere along the line, they were around an abusive church where they got, or no? Am I?
Yeah, somewhere in their developmental stage, they had some confusion take place. And the confusion was that they had abandonment issues and that they could be nurtured through some kind of sexual activity. And this confusion at a developmental state stays on with people. Those childhood messages are heavy, and they're phantoms, and the phantoms attack us.
And actually, when some people are trying their best to work through an addiction, some of the methodology that they may use may become inadvertently a part of the ritualization. And that's really an interesting thing. I'm talking about a Christian couple, for example, having premarital sex, and really very much disturbed by this because their Christian belief is against that. So what they do is to pray about that, and then they get up from praying and they immediately have more premarital sex, and then they feel more despair, and then they think about it more, and they get down and they pray about it, and actually their prayers have become a part of the ritualization. I know that sounds controversial, but that can happen to people, and in their case it did.
It becomes a prelude to sex.
That's right.
Well, it's interesting now. See, now that we're talking about this again, now I happen to be a Christian, and one of the things that I learned, I had a divorce a couple of years ago, and since that time I haven't been in a relationship.
At Centennial Peaks Hospital in Louisville, when you call, the first thing we do is listen.
When I'm listening to someone talk about themselves or a loved one who's having problems with alcohol or drugs, I don't just hear what they're saying. I hear what they're feeling, what they're going through. I hear their concern, their fear, their frustration, because they want help, but they don't know what to do. That's why when you call Centennial Peaks Hospital, the first thing I'll do is listen. Then together, we can figure out the next step. If you or someone you care about needs help with an alcohol or drug problem, call us now at Centennial Peaks Hospital at 673-9990. That's Centennial Peaks Hospital, 673-9990. Call now.
You're listening to a taped rebroadcast of the best of addiction-free radio with Jann Scott, so you won't be able to reach Jann right now at the number given out.
Okay, we are back here. Our next segment will be with Rob and Gina. Gina's about to speak. She is a member of another group, and she's going to be talking about her family experiences and her recovery. She also had some real relationship problems and abuse at home. So we'll go to that now.
In the course of my recovery, basically my story is that I grew up in a very dysfunctional alcoholic home, and my mother is very much an enabler to my father's alcoholism and very much a codependent who's living her life through him. And so as far as my recovery's gone, I spent 3 years in therapy learning about all my anger about the dysfunction in my family, and now I'm at a point, because of, I believe, through working the steps and being a part of Codependence Anonymous, I'm starting to learn that I can work with the feelings that I have, and I don't need to blame my parents anymore. They've done the best that they could. Now it's time for me to work on and becoming the best person that I can. And it says in the welcome in Codependence Anonymous, we've all learned to survive life, but in Coda we're learning to live life. And I really feel that recovery happening in my life right now.